Take off your clothes. The American guard said it every morning, every single morning. And he watched. Liesel Brandt, 25, Wehrmacht signals operator from Munich, counted the days on the wooden beam above her bunk. 17 scratches. 17 mornings of the same ritual, the same words, the same eyes. But something about those eyes didn't match what propaganda promised. Over 425,000 German POWs in U.S. custody by February 1945. Only 387 were women. Liesel shared this barracks with 17 others. Every one of them had received the same training, what Americans do to captured women. Every one of them waited for the watching to become something worse. Sie beobachten uns beim Ausziehen, jeden Tag. Das ist erst der Anfang. They watch us undress, every day. This is only the beginning. The barracks smelled like wet wool and fear. Wooden walls thin enough to hear American soldiers laughing outside. Floor cold against bare feet during the morning change. Sergeant William Crawford, 22, from Ohio, entered at exactly 600. Same time every day, same clipboard, same uncomfortable expression that Liesel couldn't decode. "Inspection," he announced. His German was terrible. His pronunciation made the words sound like a threat. 18 women began removing nightclothes, hands trembling, eyes down, waiting for the moment when watching became touching. Margaret Vogel, 19, youngest in barracks, captured 3 weeks ago, hadn't stopped shaking since the first inspection. Her fingers fumbled with buttons. Tears leaked silently down her cheeks. Crawford's eyes moved across the room. But Liesel noticed something wrong. His gaze didn't linger where she expected, not on chests, not on thighs, not on the vulnerable places where propaganda said American eyes would feast. He was looking at her collar, at her cuffs, at her waistband, at the seams where fabric met fabric. His pencil scratched against the clipboard, notes she couldn't read, about things she couldn't understand. The nightclothes came off, the day uniforms went on, 90 seconds of exposure that felt like 90 hours. Crawford nodded, turned, left. No touching, no comments, no lingering looks at bodies, just eyes on fabric, eyes on seams, eyes on places where cloth folded and hid. Liesel pulled her uniform straight. The cold morning air raised bumps on her skin. Around her, women exhaled relief that would reset tomorrow at 600. But the question lodged in her brain like shrapnel. His eyes were fixed on her collar, not her body. Why? His eyes should have been on her chest. They weren't. They were on her collar, on her seams, on her pockets. Liesel spent the next 3 mornings tracking Sergeant Crawford's eye movements, analytical training from her signals work translated into observation protocol. She mapped his pattern like decoding enemy transmissions. Collar first, always collar. Then cuffs, both wrists examined while hands raised to remove. Nightgown, waistband next, then pockets, even when empty. Finally hem, traced without touching. POW clothing inspection protocol mandated checks for hidden weapons, escape tools, contraband. German women's uniforms contained 14 potential concealment points. Time per inspection, 90 seconds maximum per prisoner. Warum schaut auf meine Nähte? Was sucht dort? Why is he looking at my seams? What is he looking for there? The morning air bit through thin fabric. Liesel's breath clouded as she changed, keeping peripheral vision locked on Crawford's face. His jaw stayed tight. His eyes stayed mechanical, moving point to point like a machine following instructions it didn't enjoy. Ruth Hoffman, 28, former Wehrmacht nurse, who'd served at 3 field hospitals, noticed the pattern too. She positioned herself next to Liesel during the 4th inspection. "Watch his hands," Ruth whispered, as nightgowns dropped. Crawford's hands never moved toward women. They stayed on his clipboard, pencil scratching notes that Liesel desperately wanted to read. "It's not us," Ruth breathed. The words barely registered over Margaret's soft crying across the room. The 19-year-old hadn't improved. If anything, each inspection drove her deeper into terror. Crawford finished his circuit. 18 women inspected in 27 minutes. His boots echoed on wooden floor as he departed. Ruth grabbed Liesel's arm before she could follow routine toward breakfast. "Did you see it? The pattern?" "I saw it. He's not looking at bodies, he's looking at uniforms." Liesel's mind raced through possibilities. Checking for hidden weapons made sense. Checking for escape tools made sense. But every morning, the same inspection, the same seams. Something didn't add up. "Maybe it's procedure," Liesel offered. "Standard military inspection." Ruth shook her head. "I served in field hospitals, watched dozens of inspections, never saw anyone look at collars like that, like he expects to find something." Cold certainty settled in Liesel's stomach. This wasn't random. Crawford was searching for something specific. "It's not us," Ruth repeated. "He's looking for something in the uniforms." "But what?" Razor blades, cyanide capsules, wire, maps. The Americans weren't looking at women. They were looking for death. Liesel approached Crawford after the 5th morning inspection. Her English was fragments, words collected from American radio broadcasts during signal monitoring. His German was worse, but hands speak when mouths fail. She mimed sewing, pointed at her collar, made a questioning face. Crawford's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something darker. Items found in German uniforms during processing: 847 razor blades, 23 cyanide capsules, 156 lengths of wire capable of strangulation, POW suicide rate highest in first 72 hours. Daily inspection protocol reduced self-harm incidents by 73%. Sie wollen uns nicht verletzen. Sie wollen uns am Sterben hindern. They don't want to hurt us. They want to stop us from dying. Crawford pulled out a small notebook, drew pictures. A razor blade hidden in a collar fold, a woman's wrist with lines, a circle for a capsule, an X through each image. "We find," he said slowly, "we stop. You live." The words landed like bombs. Liesel translated for Ruth in rapid German. Ruth's face went through shock, disbelief, reluctant understanding. "Previous prisoners," Crawford continued, struggling with explanation. "Woman, razor, collar." He drew a line across his wrist. Second night. Second night. Someone had hidden a blade in her uniform, used it to end everything 48 hours after capture. The barracks suddenly felt smaller. Liesel looked at the women around her, 17 strangers bound by imprisonment. How many carried their own death implements? How many waited for the right moment? Her eyes found Ilse Richter, 31, former factory supervisor from Dortmund. Ilse's face had gone white. Liesel watched Ilse's hand move involuntarily, fingers brushing her uniform hem. A gesture too quick to be casual, too nervous to be coincidence. Crawford's notebook showed a razor blade position, sewn inside hem, invisible unless searched during changing. Ilse's hem. Liesel kept her face neutral, said nothing. But the observation burned into memory. Crawford finished his explanation with a word Liesel didn't need translation for. Schutz. Protection. He left for morning duties. The barracks fell silent. Women processed the revelation differently, some relieved, some suspicious, some unable to reconcile propaganda with explanation. Liesel waited until others dispersed toward breakfast. Then she looked at Ilse. Ilse looked back. Her hand hadn't moved from her hem. Tomorrow's inspection would find it. Ilse had 30 minutes before morning inspection. 30 minutes to decide, keep the blade or surrender it. Midnight in the barracks. Cold leaked through wooden walls. 18 women breathed in darkness, most asleep, some pretending. Liesel found Ilse awake on her bunk, fingers tracing the hem of her uniform. "I know," Liesel whispered. Ilse didn't pretend ignorance. 3 weeks of shared captivity had stripped away pretense. "I brought it from home," Ilse confessed. "Sewed it in before deployment. Factory issued." German military women received 4 hours of capture protocol training. 67% were issued self-harm implements for emergencies. Indoctrination clear. Death preferable to American captivity. Death preferable to whatever came after. The watching stopped. Ich habe es mitgebracht, mich zu töten. Jetzt weiß ich nicht, ob ich leben will. I brought it to kill myself. Now I don't know if I want to live. Ilse's voice cracked on the last word. Her fingers found the blade's outline through fabric, steel edge sewn into cotton hem, waiting for the moment when living became unbearable. They're not hurting us, Liesel said carefully. The inspections, they're looking for exactly what you're carrying. I know. Ilse's laugh was hollow. They want us alive, but I don't know if I want that anymore. Thread snapped somewhere in the darkness, another woman stirring. Liesel checked that others still slept. If they find it tomorrow, punishment, isolation, maybe something worse. Or maybe just confiscation. Crawford said they find these things. He didn't say they punish. Ilse considered this. Her breathing sharpened. Metal cold fear mixed with something almost like hope. From 3 bunks away, a voice emerged from darkness. Young, trembling. Margaret. I have one too. Liesel's stomach dropped. 19, Margaret continued, words tumbling out. My mother sewed it into my pocket lining, said the Americans that they would. She couldn't finish. 2 blades, 2 women carrying their own deaths, in one barracks. Liesel suddenly wondered how many others sat in darkness, fingers touching hidden steel, waiting for courage or despair, whichever came first. We could remove them, Liesel offered, before inspection, before they find out. And do what with them? Ilse asked. The question hung in frozen air. 9 implements of death couldn't simply disappear. The inspection was 6 hours away. Discovery was certain, unless they controlled the discovery themselves. Margaret's quiet crying filled the silence. 19 years old, 3 weeks carrying death. By midnight, 7 women had placed razor blades on Liesel's blanket. 7. In one barracks of 18. Word spread in whispers, bunk to bunk, hand to hand. Women who'd hidden self-harm implements came forward one by one, not announced, just quiet footsteps in darkness, soft clinks of metal on wool. Ilse's blade, Margaret's blade. 5 others Liesel hadn't suspected. Then Hedwig Zimmermann appeared, 41 years old. Survived the Stalingrad retreat when 90,000 others didn't. Carried something small in her palm, not a razor blade, a capsule, glass casing around liquid death, cyanide. She'd kept it for 2 years. Wir trugen unseren eigenen Tod mit uns, weil wir dachten, ihr Tod sei schlimmer. We carried our own death with us, because we thought their death would be worse. 7 razor blades, 1 length of wire, 1 cyanide capsule, arranged on rough wool like confessions at an altar. Percentage of barracks carrying self-harm implements, 50%. Nearly half had prepared to end themselves, rather than endure what propaganda promised. The pile gleamed faintly in moonlight through wall cracks. Liesel stared at it. Death rendered in steel and glass and wire, the weapons they'd planned to use against themselves. Hedwig sat beside her. The oldest woman in the barracks spoke rarely. When she did, others listened. I kept it since Stalingrad, Hedwig said. Watched friends die. Told myself I'd choose my own. Ending. Her voice carried no emotion. Flat as the Russian steppe where she'd learned that death could be preferable to survival. What changed? Liesel asked. The American. Crawford. Hedwig's fingers touched the cyanide capsule. He flinches every inspection. Did you notice? His jaw tightens. His eyes go somewhere else while looking at us. Liesel had noticed, the discomfort she couldn't decode. He hates it, Hedwig continued. Hates watching us undress. Hates the procedure that requires it. But he does it anyway. Because he's ordered to. Because it saves lives. Ours. Hedwig picked up the capsule. If he can suffer through watching to keep us alive, I can suffer through living. The collection sat on the blanket. 9 implements. 9 almost deaths. 9 decisions reversed in one night. Ruth arrived with a final contribution, thin wire she'd hidden in her nurse's bag, for strangulation, for escape, for ending. "What do we do with these?" Ruth asked. Liesel made the decision before she fully understood it. "We surrender them ourselves, tonight, before inspection." Liesel knocked on the guard station door at 0200, holding a blanket bundled in her arms. The American raised his rifle. "Private Thomas Riley, 19, from Boston, first deployment, first night shift, first German approaching his station, in darkness." His hands trembled on the weapon. Protocol said shoot first. Instinct said, wait. "Stop!" His voice cracked. Liesel stopped, raised the blanket slowly, opened the folds. Moonlight caught metal, razor blades, wire, something small, and glass. Voluntary contraband surrender documented in only 3% of POW cases. Standard response, confiscation, no punishment. No protocol existed for what Liesel was doing, approaching armed guards in darkness to surrender death implements. "Wir geben auf, uns selbst zu töten. Ist das Kapitulation oder Hoffnung?" We surrender the means to kill ourselves. Is that surrender or hope? Riley's rifle lowered inch by inch. Confusion replaced fear on his young face. What is this?" Liesel's English failed her. She pointed at the blades, drew a line across her wrist, shook her head, made a throwing-away gesture. Understanding sparked in Riley's eyes. "Sergeant!" His voice echoed across the sleeping camp. "Sergeant Crawford?" 3 minutes later, Crawford appeared in undershirt and boots, rifle ready, expression shifting from alert to puzzled as he saw Liesel standing in moonlight, holding a blanket full of steel. He approached slowly, looked at the collection, counted silently, 7 blades, 1 wire, 1 capsule, 9 death implements from 18 women. His pencil scratched against the clipboard he'd grabbed from the station. Notes about everything, notes about this. "You," Crawford struggled with words, switched to German fragments. "You give, all, selbst?" Liesel nodded. "Selbst, ourselves, before inspection." Crawford's face did something Liesel didn't expect. His jaw unclenched. His eyes lost that mechanical distance. For 3 seconds he looked at her like a person instead of a prisoner. Then he said 4 words that nobody in the barracks would ever forget. "Danke, thank you, brave." The German word, the English translation, and a word that belonged to neither language but meant everything in both. Brave, not submissive, not defeated. Brave. Liesel's throat tightened. Behind her, Ruth and Hedwig had followed, witnesses to whatever punishment or understanding awaited. Crawford handed the blanket to Riley, took a fresh piece of paper from his clipboard. "I write report," he said slowly. "Voluntary surrender. Good record. For you. Good record. In a POW file. Because they'd given up the means to end themselves." The morning inspection happened as scheduled, but everything about it was different. 600 Crawford entered the barracks, clipboard in hand, same time, same procedure, same 18 women standing beside their bunks. But his eyes found Liesel's first, a nod, brief, almost invisible, acknowledgement of what had passed between enemy and enemy in moonlight hours earlier. Pre-surrender inspection time, 90 seconds per prisoner. Post-surrender inspection time, 12 seconds per prisoner. Crawford moved through the barracks in 4 minutes flat, eyes barely pausing on seams and collars, pencil making quick marks that Liesel could almost read. He knew they'd surrendered everything. The inspection became ritual, not search. Vertraut uns jetzt, weil wir zuerst vertraut haben. He trusts us now because we trusted first. Marguerite changed clothes without crying for the first time. Her hands still trembled, but her face held something new, not hope exactly. Absence of despair. The weight of hidden steel no longer pressed against her thoughts. Ruth Hoffman positioned herself by the window after Crawford left. She pulled a small notebook from her mattress, scavenged paper, hoarded pencil stub. The beginning of what would become the most detailed record of German women's POW experience in American custody. "I'm documenting everything," Ruth announced quietly. "Someone should know what happened here." Liesel watched her write in cramped German script, dates, times, Crawford's name, the voluntary surrender, the changed inspections. History being recorded in a barracks that smelled like wet wool and looked like every other wooden structure in the camp. Why now? Liesel asked. Because something shifted. Ruth's pencil paused. We expected monsters. We prepared to die rather than survive capture. And instead, she gestured at the barracks. Women dressing normally. No crying, no hidden steel, no waiting for the inspection that preceded assault. Instead, a 22-year-old from Ohio says "Danke" when we give up our razor blades. Hedwig approached with her own observation. Something still bothers me. The inspection itself. Why watch us change? Why not search? The clothes separately? Take them while we sleep. Check them. Return them. The question hadn't occurred to Liesel. Now it lodged in her mind. Why require women to undress in front of guards? Why not simply inspect clothing without bodies inside? Ruth wrote the question in her notebook, underlined it twice. I'll find out, she said. Before this ends, someone will explain. The answer would come, but not for months. April 1945, liberation approaching. Crawford finally explained why they watched. The war was ending. Everyone felt it. American guards walked lighter. German prisoners whispered about futures that suddenly seemed possible. Crawford visited the barracks unofficially. No clipboard, no inspection. Just a soldier with something to say before rotation orders sent him home. Earlier, separate clothing searches failed. 34% of contraband missed. Prisoners hid implements on their bodies during searches, then re-hid them in returned clothes. Simultaneous inspection, seeing body and uniform together during change, achieved 89% detection rate. Sie haben uns beobachtet, uns zu schützen, nicht uns zu benutzen. They watched us to protect us, not to use us. Crawford's explanation came in fragments. Improved German from months of practice. Ruth translating difficult words. The picture forming piece by piece. First method, Crawford said. Take clothes. Search separate. Give back. He shook his head. Women hide things? He pointed at his body. Under arms, between... He gestured vaguely. Then put back in clothes after return. The logic clicked into place. Searching clothes separately allowed prisoners to transfer contraband from clothing to body and back again. Only watching the complete change, when body and clothing were both visible, prevented the transfer. Hedwig asked the question everyone wondered, direct as always. Did you ever enjoy watching us? Crawford's face changed. The discomfort Liesel had noticed during every inspection returned. Deeper now, more visible, without duty to hide behind. No. The word came out hard. Never. He pulled a paper from his pocket, worn soft from handling, official document with American military stamps. 3 times I ask for transfer. 3 times they say no. Transfer requests. Denied. Because his barracks had 0 suicides, 0 self-harm attempts. His method was working too well to lose him. Ruth took the paper. Read English slowly. Her face shifted through surprise, understanding, something close to pity. He requested reassignment to combat duty, Ruth translated. Preferred being shot at than watching women undress every morning. The barracks fell silent. Crawford, the guard who watched them change every morning, the enemy whose eyes they feared and misunderstood, had tried 3 times to escape the assignment that haunted him. My sister, Crawford said quietly, same age as Margaret. I see her every inspection. His sister's face in Margaret's tears, his mother's warnings in their fear, his own humanity eroding with every morning that duty required violation. Crawford requested transfer from inspection duty 3 times. Command denied him every time. He was too effective at keeping prisoners alive. 0 suicides in his barracks. 0 self-harm attempts. The voluntary surrender that became training protocol for camps across Europe. His methods, the eye pattern tracking seams instead of bodies, the brief nods acknowledging humanity, the German word Danke that broke through enemy barriers, saved lives that statistics would never fully count. The Crawford Protocol. That's what they called it after the war. Standard training for POW inspection officers. Look at clothing, not bodies. Acknowledge prisoners as people. Accept voluntary surrender with respect. Hat gelitten, uns zu schützen. Der Feind, der kein Feind war. He suffered to protect us, the enemy who wasn't an enemy. Ruth Hoffman's diary survived the war, traveled with her through liberation, through processing, through repatriation to a Germany rebuilding from ashes. In 1987, she donated it to the Holocaust Memorial Museum. 42 years of distance from the barracks that smelled like wet wool and fear. The diary documents everything: dates, names, the collection on the blanket. Crawford's face when Liesel said, "Danke," back to him. Margaret Vogel, 19 during captivity, 20 when liberation came, became a psychiatric nurse, specialized in trauma. Spent 40 years helping others survive the memories she'd carried herself. Hedwig Zimmermann never spoke about Stalingrad or the cyanide capsule she'd carried for 2 years, but she kept the transfer request document Crawford gave Ruth before leaving, framed it in her kitchen, reminder that enemies could suffer for each other. Liesel Brandt returned to Munich, married, had children, told them about the American Guard who watched women undress every morning and hated every second of it. Take off your clothes. The words that meant terror became the routine that saved their lives. 18 women entered that barracks expecting propaganda to become reality, expecting eyes to precede hands, expecting watching to become taking. Instead, they found a 22-year-old from Ohio who developed eye patterns to avoid looking at bodies, who said "Danke" when prisoners trusted him with their hidden deaths, who requested transfer 3 times because the assignment was destroying him. Sometimes protection looks like violation. Sometimes the guard watching you undress is the one keeping you alive. And sometimes the person suffering most during the inspection isn't the prisoner. It's the young man who sees his sister in every face and can't escape duty that saves lives by breaking his own.